I never knew nothing about human trafficking. I never knew that I was being exploited. I never knew. I didn't wake up and be like, oh, this is what's happening to me. It's something that I thought was normal.
80,000 reported missing people on any given day in the United States. At the same time, there are over 10,000 unidentified bodies. There is no national law requiring agencies to share this information, leaving many families in the dark about their loved one's fate.
Today, family and volunteers, they reported cadaver dogs detected a few locations where human remains might have been buried.
You could have a body that was on one side of a county line, and the next county could have had that individual reported as missing, and no one may have talked to each other.
And we just haven't forgotten, and we're not going to stop until we know what happened.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the Gone Missing Pod. I am your host, Nicole Mancha Mercado, and you will hear Alyssa Gutierrez, my wonderful co-host, in this episode, but you are also going to hear the voice of someone who may not sound familiar. We had the amazing honor and privilege of being able to speak with Laura Estrada. Laura's niece, Abigail Estrada, went missing in June of 2007, and Laura came on to speak with us more about facts about the case that we didn't know, that hadn't been released, as well as just about Abigail in general. This is going to be a two-part interview, so you will hear the first one today and the next one will come out next week. If you want to reach out, if you have any questions, anything like that, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram and Twitter at The Gone Missing Pod or on Facebook at The Gone Missing Podcast. You can also become a patron and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves Network and go to The Gone Missing Podcast. So we are talking about your niece, Abigail Estrada. Tell us a little bit, one of the things that we love to do when we can find it is find out information on who they were as people. So can you tell us a little bit about Abigail?
Take your time.
She was a beautiful soul. She lit up the room. Very humorous. Always liked to giggle. Always liked to do pranks. She was a beautiful soul. She loved her siblings very much.
Yeah.
And she was very much loved to be around family. And she was only 13 when she went missing. So she was barely beginning her life, as a teen.
She's beautiful. We saw pictures of her and she's just like, you can tell she was the light in the room. Like she just had that smile in some of her photos. And I'm like, this girl loved to be around people. You can just tell.
That she did indeed.
So Abigail went missing in 2007. And it was in Harlingen, Texas. Am I saying that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So kind of tell us what you guys went through and what you experienced. And then also just really, again, this is your platform and your story. We just want you to be able to get her name out there and her face out there.
As far as what we went through, we're still going through it. It's a nightmare. It's affected her siblings, her mother and her father. It's like a nightmare. They had to undergo therapy. Her younger siblings. When they found out she got murdered, they were in the room when the detective went over and spoke to their grandmother, and they heard in detail what happened. They were young. They can't recall the age they were, but just to hear in detail the horrific way she got murdered, they had to go through therapy, and they still go through therapy, having to deal with it. Her mom as well, and my brother at the time was incarcerated, but I actually had to give him the news that she went missing, and then later tell him that she got murdered. He was incarcerated for a different incident here in Austin, Texas. It didn't happen in Harlingen. They had moved to Harlingen after he got incarcerated.
Okay. I can't even imagine as a parent to not be able to be there, right? It was just, he wasn't able to be there and be part of it. And I mean, obviously, we read the details of the case, but as I'm sure you know, the details are very limited because it's what law enforcement puts out.
Right.
So we just know that she went to go see her boyfriend and then she was gone. Like that's how they kind of put it out there. And I'm not sure if that's exactly how it happened, but that's kind of how it was explained. Is she just went out and was gone.
Well, the way it was told to me by her mom, um, it was, I'm going to tell you in detail what I know and what I recall. Um, Ruben Torres was trying to show Abigail how to drive a car because he had several cars. So they went riding around with their younger siblings, and they went and dropped him off at Abigail's home. And Ruben wanted to watch movies, and they picked up some movies, and they wanted to go to the store and buy snacks. So they took off going to the store, but they went to a different route. He wanted to take her to a longer route so she can get more experience in driving. And he had promised her if she learned how to drive, she would get one of his cars because he got several cars. So on the way to the store, he drove past this road that had an auto body shop, and there was people there. And the whole motive was he basically used her to drive the car, go down that road, and without her being aware, he committed a drive-by shooting in retaliation for somebody that worked at that auto body shop that killed his only brother. So when he shot the gun, she stopped because she was driving and freaking out, like, what the heck is going on? Yeah. Got off the car, ran around it, and he grabbed her and threw her in the car. And he drove off in the car, but on the way on the road, somewhere, they hit a pothole and started swerving. He lost kind of control of the car. I can't remember at this point if someone saw or a police officer saw, but they got pulled over. Once they got pulled over, they had Ruben get off the car, ask him questions. And at the time when the officer was asking him questions, he got a call. The call came in indicating there was a drive-by shooting and a description of the people and the vehicle. So at that point, he realized it was them. He put Ruben in cuffs, told him, you put your hands behind your back, took him to the car. And before he was taking him to the car, Ruben had yelled out and told Abigail, hey, get my phone from underneath the seat. And she was yelling back, I can't get it. I can't reach it. And she knew what was underneath the seat. Didn't want to touch it. She was still frightened. So at that point, the officer put Ruben in the car, went back to the car, pulled out the gun, and then automatically arrested Abigail as well. So they went both to jail. Mind you, she was only 13 years old, wasn't present by an attorney, but she did give her statement, and her mom authorized it. I wasn't aware of that part, but she did authorize it. They let her out. They kept him there, and somehow, she got sent to Austin. She came to stay with a family member. When he was able to make a call, I believe, or he got out. I can't recall how it was, but he got a hold of Abigail through a family member, bought her a bus ticket to come back to Harlingen, Texas, under her cousin's name. Her mom did not know that she was going back to Harlingen. She was told to stay in town till all of that died down. She could stay away because she gave an affidavit. She was a witness in the drive-by shooting. So it was his birthday. I believe it was around his birthday. He wanted her in town to celebrate with them. So she took the bus to Harlingen, waited at the Greyhound for about an hour. Ruben never showed up. So at that point, she called her mom and called her grandma. They were freaking out while she was in town. She took a cab there, took a cab home, and when she got home, She went straight to bed. She was in a Winnie the Pooh slippers, a spaghetti strap shirt, and shorts. Abigail wasn't the type to actually come out dressed in PJs. She had to have, her hair, dressed properly, her makeup. So when she got there, she went straight to bed because, of course, it was early morning hours that she caught the bus. An hour passed by. Ruben finally came. He showed up at the apartment, asked Abigail's mom, "Can I talk to her?" And she says, "You could talk to her, but only on the porch." So she let them be on the porch. I believe I can't recall. She said 30 minutes or an hour. Time had passed. She looked out. They were gone. There was an eyewitness that lived at the apartment across from them. It was a young girl. Saw everything that they went the whole time that they were outside. Saw whatever happened. I don't know if he took her forcibly or they just went to the car, but there was supposedly other people in the vehicle with Ruben. They were there with him. So we don't know how he took her or she went willingly. But the little girl that was outside that saw everything did not want to come forward. Her family was threatened that they would get murdered. But his story was that after they talked, that she went into the vehicle with them. They started arguing again, and that she got off at the stop sign near the apartments. And that was his story, that he did not know where she was. So Jasenia kept calling his mom, his dad, called him. He wouldn't answer. Called until the next day, finally answered. He came by barefooted in his car and said that he was out washing his car. He hadn't talked to Abigail. Through that whole night, the whole day, he had no concern. Hey, did you find Abigail? Let's find her. They had no interest in looking for her at all. And the parents, neither. They didn't call. They didn't care. But when he arrived at the apartment, he was barefooted, washed his car, and there was sand all over it. So that made Jasenia believe maybe he took her to the beach and murdered her there. Rumors are said to believe that she's buried in a field somewhere in Harlingen. And the way that she got murdered, she was shot in the head and was begging for her life. And another rumor, I'm not, quote unquote, I don't know if it's true, but before she got murdered, the guys that were all with her sexually assaulted her. But I'm not sure if that's the truth. The police never said anything. We won't ever know because her body will be decomposed.
First of all, I'm so sorry for everything your family has gone through. I can't even imagine. And Abigail being 13, she was so young. And
yes,
a lot of these cases that we talk about, I really struggle when we see these situations, because it is at the very bottom, it's domestic violence,
yes.
And it's this manipulation that these boys and men hold over these young girls and young women. And I'm sure she thought she was in love because you're 13. I think about when I was 13 and I thought I was in love with, my first boy that I liked. And it's very obviously, as adults, we can look back and say, oh, that probably wasn't. It just was this really big feeling that we didn't understand. But when you're in the moment, I'm sure she felt like she could trust him. And that's where I get so angry, because it's she trusted him. And he took that trust and twisted it and then killed her. And it just breaks my heart. I'm going to start getting emotional. But I think that's where I really just sit there. And when we were going through this case and I'm looking at it and I'm and then also he was 16.
Yes.
Where does this, you know what I mean? Where does this come from? Where does this violence begin at 16 years old?
He was said to believe when he did the drive-by shooting, and as he murdered her, that he was under what they call planks. I don't know what that is, but he was on pills and just high when he did the drive-by shooting.
Was he involved, or did he have any prior violence or anything like that? Or was the drive-by the first thing that, at least that you guys, the family knew about, that he was involved in?
The drive-by was the first thing that I know about. I'm not sure if my sister-in-law or my ex-sister-in-law knew of his background or anything, but that's the only one that I know of.
Okay. Yeah, I think when we first talked about the case, we were wondering if they knew Ruben, like the family knew each other. Just because she was 13. So I know that it can be, like sometimes the family members want to be like, I need to know who you are and who you're spending time with. My parents were very much like, I need to know who you're with.
Yeah. Jasenia and her mother, they both knew the parents.
Okay.
They went to each other's house, they visited, they talked. However, at the time of the court hearing, they denied even knowing Abigail. They denied even buying her clothes. Denied her even coming over. Denied even knowing my ex-sister-in-law at the time. They had no recollection of her existence.
That's
So
crazy.
that was wrong. They actually got a charge for apprehension coming from Mexico when they were first looking for Ruben. I don't know what happened to that case. I don't know why they got sentenced. They didn't get sentenced because they had part in hiding him when he was first convicted of murder, and the charges were dropped. So I don't know if they dropped their charges as well.
So in the case, and while this was when it was first happening and the charges were brought up against Ruben, did you feel as if I guess I was a little confused as to why the charges got dropped, as if they didn't feel they have enough evidence, or did they communicate that with you, or did you guys just find out the charge was dropped and he was just going to go in for the drive-by charge?
Well, there wasn't enough evidence to her murder, but the first detective that was on the case had told me that the vehicle that they were in, that they had repossessed, they had found a strand of hair and a drop of blood in the vehicle. Excuse me. But the detective never told me that if it was Abigail's or not. They confiscated the vehicle. They held it for several months, and they did tests, but the detective was asked not to give me information anymore because at the time I was talking to the media and I was trying to spread the word. Hey, somebody knows something. I was trying to find her. I wanted to be her. I am her voice to this day. I do want to find her. I do have hopes that she is found, and I know that there is several witnesses from the case that have come forward. However, they have gotten threats by Ruben's family and friends that something will occur to them if they speak up.
Yeah, I just can't even imagine how you guys are doing this and how you're such an advocate for her, and you're the family members we talk about. We're like, they have these family members who are pounding the pavement and making sure people remember, and that is so important. Did you feel as if you got assistance from law enforcement during the process or in the beginning, or how did that work with you and the family? Because I know a lot of times when we look at stuff, we see very limited information, but that's not always the case for family members, and sometimes it is. And how does that affect you all?
Well, in the beginning, they were, because it was two different detectives that worked on her case. In the beginning, the first detective was very helpful with me, giving me information, and they worked very well with the grandmother who now has passed. They worked with her. They gave them enough information, but towards the end, her mom and the grandmother decided just to keep in contact with them, not to share too much with me because of course I was going to the media. I wasn't saying too much on the case, but when the second detective got on case, they weren't helpful to me. They really didn't speak to me. I did reach out to the Texas Rangers. I did reach out to FBI. They did tell me that the law enforcement in their city were the ones that had the case. They did work on it for a little bit, but I never heard back.
And I wonder, especially in cases like these where it's been so many years, why they're hesitant to put out information, especially because he's still incarcerated at this point. So
Right.
why they would be hesitant to put out that information, because I don't think it could do anything but help.
Right.
So he ended up being incarcerated. Was it in 2015 for her murder?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think when I was reading it, I was fairly certain. So what happened? What was different in that trial than the previous one where the charges were dropped?
There wasn't enough evidence. It couldn't stick with the case because there was no murder weapon and there was no body. And then there wasn't actually no witness. So the 2017 case, there was witnesses.
Okay. That came
And then
forward.
one of them, being my nephew, he did take the stand of the night of the drive-by shooting. So that helped.
Good. Yeah.
And then the day right before a hearing, one of the witness got a threat. This is what I was told. He got a threat while Ruben was in jail, in the city jail. He talked to somebody that was there that got a hold of his cousin and told his cousin if he's going to speak at the trial, that he's going to have something done to him if he spoke up. So that morning of the trial, the cousin backed out.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Gone Missing podcast, and we will talk to you all next week, our second part with Laura Estrada. Feel free to reach out to us on Instagram and Twitter at the Gone Missing Pod, or on Facebook at the Gone Missing Podcast. You can also become a patron and support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Mercado Airwaves Network, and go to the Gone Missing Podcast.